Have you noticed that the more spiritually awake you become, the harder it is to be in a relationship? You try to love, but everything feels heavy. You try to connect, but something inside you disconnects first. You're not cold and you're not broken. You're just finally awake enough to see what your soul can no longer tolerate. You're exhausted by shallow conversations, drained by emotional chaos, and bored by connections that never meet your depth. You feel invisible around people who only understand the version of you that no longer exists. And deep down, you've started to wonder, is there something wrong with me? Or is staying single actually protecting me? This video will give you the answer. Not from judgment, but from Jung's deepest psychological truth. Sometimes your soul pulls you away from relationships, not because you're failing, but because you're finally growing. And when you understand why, everything you've been feeling will suddenly make sense. Carl Jung believed that when a person begins to awaken, solitude isn't a decision, it's an instinct. Something inside you pulls away from the noise, not because you're antisocial or emotionally unavailable, but because your psyche has finally stopped tolerating what once felt normal. The masks, the roles, the emotional performances. Suddenly you can feel every layer of it, and it becomes impossible to pretend you don't. As individuation begins, your unconscious pushes everything you've ignored to the surface. The wounds you glossed over, the habits you inherited, the relationships you kept out of fear. This is why conversations you once endured now drain you. Why being around certain people makes your body tighten. Why you walk home from social situations feeling strangely empty, wondering, why does this feel wrong now? You start noticing people's hidden motives, their emotional hunger, the subtle manipulation in their kindness, the expectations behind their affection. You see how often you sacrifice your truth just to keep the peace. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Jung called this the withdrawal of projection. The moment you reclaim all the parts of yourself you once handed to others. So solitude rises not as loneliness, but as psychic recalibration. A sacred pause, a return to integrity. The soul's way of saying, before you merge with someone else, you need to meet yourself first. Spiritual awakening doesn't make you more sensitive. It makes you more perceptive. And the deeper your perception becomes, the more exhausting ordinary interactions feel. Not because people are bad, but because you can now feel what they don't say. You sense their anxiety before they speak. You feel their expectations the moment they enter the room. You pick up the tension hidden beneath their smile. And your body reacts before your mind can explain why. Jung believed that the unconscious is always communicating, not through words, but through energy. And once you're awake, you can no longer filter that energy out. This is why someone's presence can drain you faster than a full day of work. Why 5 minutes with the wrong person can leave you emotionally dehydrated. Why you walk away from certain conversations feeling like a piece of your soul just leaked out. Here is the painful truth. Most people don't engage with you. They drain you, not intentionally, but because they're unconscious of their own wounds. They look for emotional grounding, validation, or someone to hold their chaos for them. And awakened people become natural emotional sponges. Awareness sharpens your intuition, but also strips away your defenses. You feel everything, too deeply, too clearly, and it forces you to face a reality Jung understood better than anyone. When your consciousness expands, your energy becomes expensive. You can't waste it on people who don't carry their own weight. You can't give it to those who only know how to take. You can't hand your peace to someone who hasn't found theirs. This is why solitude feels more natural now. Not because you're rejecting the world, but because your nervous system finally knows what it needs to survive. One of Jung's most uncomfortable insights is this. Most relationships don't begin with two authentic selves meeting each other. They begin with two masks negotiating safety, And once you awaken, you can see those masks instantly. You start noticing how people perform confidence to hide insecurity, how they use affection to gain approval, how they present a curated version of themselves because they're terrified of being truly seen. And suddenly, what used to pass as connection now feels like theater, and you can't participate anymore. This is why staying single becomes natural after awakening. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone who can meet you, someone who has faced their own shadow instead of projecting it onto you. Someone who speaks from their soul, not their wounds. Someone who loves with awareness, not fear. Here's the truth most people avoid. Compatibility is often just two people agreeing to maintain each other's illusions. But when you wake up, your illusions die, and with them, most of your relationships. You start to see that your past connections weren't built on depth, but on need. You needed validation. They needed reassurance. You needed to escape yourself. They needed someone to hold their emptiness. This is why, after awakening, even normal relationships feel suffocating. They pull you back into the version of yourself you outgrew. They ask you to shrink your truth so the relationship can survive. And you can feel your soul tightening every time you try to play along. Jung warned that until a person becomes conscious of their inner world, they will use relationships to negotiate their unconscious fears. But the awakened cannot do this anymore. You would rather be alone than be half of yourself. This isn't coldness, it's evolution. Jung said that no relationship is more dangerous than the one you use to avoid meeting yourself. And that's exactly why, after awakening, staying single often becomes the smartest and most honest-minded thing you can do. When your consciousness expands, your shadow doesn't disappear. It steps forward. All the parts of you you've hidden in relationships start knocking on the door. Your jealousy, your fear of abandonment, your need to control, your hunger for validation, your tendency to rescue or be rescued. In the past, you handed these to your partners and called it love. Now you're forced to see them as they are, unmet parts of yourself. Think about how many relationships you entered just to escape something inside you. You didn't want to feel lonely, so you called it romance. You didn't want to feel unworthy, so you chased approval disguised as love. You didn't want to face your pain, so you hid inside someone else's chaos. Jung would say, that wasn't love. That was avoidance with a pretty story wrapped around it. The shadow phase of awakening is brutal because it strips away the fantasy that the right person will fix me. You realize no partner can carry the weight of the wounds you refuse to own. No one can heal the childhood you never grieved. No one can give you the self-respect you never practiced. If you enter a relationship before facing this, you won't be loving. You'll be negotiating your trauma through another human being. This is why solitude becomes sacred here. When you're single and awake, you finally see your patterns without distraction. You notice how you start over-explaining yourself when you feel unworthy. You see how your anxiety spikes when someone pulls away. Even if they did nothing wrong, you feel how the old urge to chase, fix, prove, or perform still lives inside you, even with no one around. That's not failure, that's data. That's your unconscious finally becoming visible. Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. This is what happens in relationships. You repeat the same story with a different face and call it bad luck in love. Staying single after awakening is not about giving up on love. It's about refusing to repeat the same unconscious script one more time. You take a step back and say, I will not drag another person into a war I haven't ended within myself. I will not call my unhealed wounds soulmate chemistry again. I will not sacrifice my individuation just to avoid the silence of my own company. That silence is where the real work begins. And until you are willing to sit in that silence and face what comes up, love will continue to be a reenactment of your shadow, not an expression of your soul. People often confuse solitude with loneliness because they've never experienced being truly at home inside themselves. But when you awaken, something extraordinary happens. You stop craving company and start craving clarity. Jung taught that solitude is not the absence of love, it's the presence of self. It's the moment your inner world becomes louder, richer, more compelling than the noise outside. This is why being alone suddenly feels lighter than being with someone who doesn't match your depth. It's not sadness, it's relief. Look at your life closely. How many times did you feel more alone in a relationship than you ever felt by yourself? How many times did you silence your truth just to keep the peace? How many times did you shrink your soul so someone else wouldn't feel threatened by it? That's loneliness. Solitude is something else entirely. Solitude is the first time you feel whole without performing for anyone. Solitude is waking up and realizing you don't have to manage someone else's emotions today. Solitude is sitting with your thoughts and discovering they're not your enemy. They're your teachers. Jung believed that the awakened person becomes a vessel for their own soul, meaning you stop outsourcing your meaning to relationships. You stop handing people the responsibility of making you feel worthy. You stop negotiating pieces of yourself just to avoid being alone at night. In solitude, you rediscover your own energy. Your intuition sharpens. Your boundaries strengthen. Your creativity expands. Your emotional system finally rests. And that's when you realize you were never afraid of being alone. You were afraid of being with the wrong person. Solitude isn't deprivation, it's detox. It's you reclaiming space, time, identity, and alignment. It's you choosing quality over noise, truth over comfort, evolution over attachment. Jung would say, the individual who learns to stand alone gains a strength that no relationship can provide. That strength is what prepares you for real love. One of the first things you notice after awakening is this strange, painful phenomenon. People start disappearing from your life, not because something dramatic happened, but because your vibration no longer matches theirs. Jung believed that when consciousness expands, your psyche starts rejecting anything that pulls you backward. And suddenly, people you once felt close to begin to feel foreign conversations that used to flow now feel forced. The chemistry fades. The connection dissolves. You can't explain it. You can only feel it. The truth is simple. You didn't lose them. You outgrew who you were with them. Think about it. The friend who thrived on gossip, you can't tolerate the energy anymore. The partner who needed constant reassurance, you no longer have the bandwidth to hold their insecurity. The person who used drama to stay close to you, your system now rejects chaos instantly. You stop resonating with people who live from their wounds because you're learning to live from your awareness. And this shift is invisible, but undeniable. Jung wrote that what you resist not only persists, it grows. This is why awakened people can't stay around those who refuse to heal. Because unconscious patterns don't just coexist with you, they attach to you. They feed on your clarity. They drain your emotional field, and your soul feels it before your mind does. You've probably felt it too. You meet someone, and within minutes your chest tightens. Your intuition whispers, this person isn't supposed to walk with you anymore. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet truth. And yet the moment you distance yourself, your energy returns. This is not rejection. This is resonance. Your soul is choosing what your ego was too afraid to walk away from. Jung explained that the psyche naturally reorganizes itself during awakening, which means people fall away, not because you're cruel, but because your consciousness has changed coordinates. You're no longer available for relationships that cost your peace. You're no longer compatible with expectations built on insecurity. You're no longer attracted to what once comforted your emptiness. The more awake you become, the more selective your energy becomes, not out of superiority, but out of self-respect. And the beautiful twist, as the wrong people fall away, the right ones begin to find you not out of need, not out of fear, but out of alignment. People assume that staying single after awakening means giving up on love. But Jung would say the opposite. You're not avoiding love. You're preparing for a kind of love most people never experience. When you've spent time alone, something changes in you. You stop using relationships as painkillers. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop calling attachment connection. You stop mistaking emotional turbulence for passion. You begin to understand that real love doesn't demand your identity as a sacrifice. It doesn't drain your nervous system. It doesn't require you to betray yourself just to keep someone close. Instead, it feels like alignment, not addiction. Jung believed that only the individuated, those who have met their shadow and survived it, are capable of true relationship. Because real love is not two halves completing each other. It's two whole beings meeting without losing themselves. Most people try to merge before they even know who they are. They bond through wounds instead of awareness. They enter relationships to avoid loneliness, to distract themselves, to hide from their inner world. And then they call the chaos chemistry. But once you awaken, you can't do this anymore. Your soul demands a higher standard, not a perfect partner, but a conscious one. Someone who doesn't need you to dim your light so they can shine. Someone who doesn't collapse into fear the moment you're honest. Someone who isn't threatened by your depth or intimidated by your silence. Someone who brings peace, not urgency. Someone who offers presence, not possession. And that's why the awakened often wait longer. Not because they're hard to love, but because they refuse to repeat the patterns they've spent years trying to break. Here is the irony. The more comfortable you become in your solitude, the more capable you become of loving deeply. Without losing yourself, when the right person arrives, you don't need them to fill you. You don't cling. You don't chase. You don't negotiate your truth for connection. You meet them as equals, not two people holding on in fear, but two souls walking side by side in freedom. This is conscious partnership. Love without dependency, connection without distortion, intimacy without self-abandonment. And you can only enter it once solitude has done its work on you. In a world that glorifies constant attachment, choosing to stay single after awakening is almost a rebellion. But at its core, it's not rebellion. It's self-respect. It's the moment you finally look at your own soul and say, I will not trade you away just to avoid being alone. Jung understood that the greatest tragedy is not to live without love, it's to live without yourself. And that is what so many people unknowingly do. They hand over their time, their energy, their dreams, their boundaries just to secure a place in someone else's story. They call it loyalty. They call it sacrifice. Sometimes they even call it destiny. But deep down, a quiet knowing whispers, this is costing me too much. Staying single during your awakening is the refusal to pay that price ever again. It means you are willing to face your nights alone rather than share your bed with someone who empties you. It means you would rather feel the honest ache of solitude than the fake comfort of being half seen. It means you are finally more interested in who you are becoming than in who you can keep. Ask yourself, is it really loneliness you fear, or the silence in which you finally hear yourself? Is it love you're missing, or the old addiction to being distracted from your own depth? How many times did you call it commitment when, in truth, it was just your fear of letting go? Jung would remind you, what you do alone reveals the relationship you have with your own soul. If you use solitude to hide, it becomes a prison. If you use solitude to listen, it becomes a temple. Staying single right now may not look glamorous from the outside. There are no grand declarations, no cinematic moments, no applause. But inwardly, something immense is happening. You are cleaning the space where love will one day live. You are shaping the boundaries that will protect you. You are building the self that will not disappear the next time you fall in love. And maybe that's the real point. You're not staying single because no one chose you. You're staying single because, for the first time, you chose you. If one day someone arrives who can meet you there, in that level of honesty, depth, and presence, you will recognize them, not because you are starving for connection, but because you will see in their solitude the same sovereignty you found in yours. Until then, let your solitude be sacred. It is not the absence of love. It is the ground where real love will finally have room to grow.